Okay, we are live. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be coming in from. We will be getting started in about 3 minutes. But here's the icebreaker question for this webcast. If you could, please post in whichever chat mechanism you have on your platform, Twitch, YouTube, or LinkedIn. Post where you are coming in from geographically, which country or which state you are coming in from. I'm coming in from New York, if anybody's interested.
Virginia.
Oh,
Oregon.
we got somebody from Calgary. I see that.
I'm coming in from the Seattle area.
Seattle. Let's see. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're coming in from. We will be getting started in about 2 minutes. If you are just joining us, please post into the chat where you are coming in from, either your country or your state. It's always a fun thing to know where folks are joining us from. Also, you might notice that we have 2 links at the bottom here. These are links for donating to Black Girls Hack, as well as the Diana Initiative. So if you're interested, just follow those links and go ahead and make a donation. We need your support. We are both nonprofit organizations. All right, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you might be. If you are just joining us, please feel free to drop into the chat where you're coming in from, either your country or your state. It's always fun to know where folks are joining us from. I'm from New York. Hello, Edmonton. All right, it is 3 minutes after the hour, so we are going to go ahead and get started here before I see you, San Francisco. Thank you. All right, before we get into the actual discussion, there's a few housekeeping items that I would like to go over. So the panelists will be taking questions from the audience. If you have a question that comes to mind, go ahead and put it into the chat mechanism on your platform, whether that be Twitch or YouTube or LinkedIn. If it's a question that we can just sort of answer asynchronously through the chat, we'll go ahead and do that. But if it's a question that one of the panelists should answer, we will be taking those at the end of the webcast. All right, so just, pop it into the chat and then we'll take them at the end. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel here. First up is Tanisha. Tanisha is the founder and executive director for Black Girls Hack, which is a national cybersecurity nonprofit that is dedicated to providing education and resources to underserved communities and increasing diversity in cybersecurity. This organization provides its members with resources as well as mentorship, direction, and training that they need in order to break into the industry and make their mark. Outside of Black Girls Hack, Tanisha is a security consultant with over 15 years of experience, and she's worked on various statements of work ranging from penetration testing to risk assessment to compliance audits, information assurance, and so on and so forth. Tanisha is also an author. She co-authored a title, Securing Our Future, Embracing the Brilliance and Resilience of Black Women in Cybersecurity. Welcome, Tanisha. Next up, we have Caitlin. Caitlin is a Principal Security Technical Program Manager from Seattle with over 13 years of experience. Her day job is focused on product security at Zoom. She is currently serving on the Diana Initiative Board for 2024. And recently, the Security Industry Association did a Women in Security Power 100, and Caitlin was named as one of those 100. She is also the co-founder of the employee resource group at Zoom for women called Women in Security. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thanks. Hi, everybody.
And last but not least, we have Mickey. Mickey's career actually spans quite a bit. At the bottom of the stack, she's worked on firmware, and at the top of the stack, she's worked on applications. But for the last 9 years, she's had a security focus where she's working as a security researcher at Intel Corporation, where she's working on secure development lifecycle, as well as acting as the product security expert for open source software. She is a writer, an award-winning public speaker on technical subjects, DEI subjects, as well as other social topics. And she serves as a board member for Portland Women in Tech, as well as a staff member for Women Who Code, PDX. And she's also a board member and staff member for the Diana Initiative. All right, welcome, Mickey.
Hi, nice to be here.
Excellent. All right, so those are our panelists, and we'll get into the discussion in a moment. But before we get into the first segment, I would like to share with everybody the impetus for this webcast. First of all, we are holding this webcast in March, Women's Month, which is timely because women are one of the groups that primarily benefits from DEI initiatives. The second reason why we're doing this webcast is because we feel it is important at this time to double down on the DEI conversation. Ever since the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action in higher education last summer, there's been an uptick in legal action against corporate DEI initiatives. So now more than ever, it is important to discuss DEI. And rather than yet another discussion that focuses on where organizations are falling short on DEI, we thought it would be refreshing to share strategies and tactics for DEI successes. And so those are the two reasons why we're doing this webcast. And with that, we're going to dive into our very first question, which Tanisha is going to lead here. And the question is, which are the building blocks that are necessary or at least beneficial to support a successful program that progresses towards parity?
I think that being able to have self-awareness for me is one of the biggest things, because I think that a lot of times, even people with the best of intentions will look around and they'll see a whole bunch of people who look like them. And I think that being able to look around and see where you are lacking in terms of diversity will help you to figure out like how you can do better and what areas that you may want to focus on. So for me, I'd say, it's important to be able to say, hey, how are we doing on diversity, to have honest conversations about them, and then to make it a priority. I think from a human perspective, not because there's a legal requirement for it, but just because it's, I think, what's right.
So Caitlin, Mickey, you want to weigh in on that one?
I can say a little bit about kind of my perspective. I think a huge piece of it is going to be that allyship. And Huxley, I think you're kind of setting the bar here with helping us organize this and, amplifying our voices into different streaming platforms. But I think it's really easy for allies to step into the space when it's happy and positive, and DE&I is very supported, and it's something that companies are embracing. But I think it's really hard for everybody, not just allies, when it's something that we see being bashed or not taken seriously at different companies, or just out in the news too. So I would ask that if there's allies on the call, that they continue to support through the good times and the bad when it comes to DE&I. And if you're not sure how to do that, reach out to somebody that, like Tanisha said, maybe doesn't look like you or doesn't sound like you, and ask, hey, how can I be supportive of you, and have a great conversation around what each of you can do to help help support each other, because I do think that, like I said, it's easy when it's easy, but we still need people to help support us when it gets a little bit more challenging.
So I'm hearing self-awareness, reaching out, but also allies that are not just fair weather allies.
Mhm.
But Mickey, other building blocks that you think would be necessary for a successful DI program?
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to add on to Tanisha and what Caitlin both spoke to is the fact that you really need to listen and listen with intent. Too many times people listen and are trying to fix the problem without actually hearing what the actual issues are. And so it's one of those things where you really need to, not say anything and just sit back and listen, and then go off and see how to formulate a fix for the issues.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to what Mickey was saying about having that open dialogue, I think is being able to have a environment that fosters frank and honest communication, right? For people to be able to say, hey, this is what's wrong, and this is without it being like offensive or without it being something that's going to be confrontational, right? Because when you do things like a lot of times the business will do like a SWOT analysis and say, what are the opportunities? What are the threats, right? And I think that one of the things a lot of companies don't realize is that, not having a open, lines of communication where you can talk about the problems, I think is definitely a threat to a lot of companies, because I think statistics have shown throughout time that companies that are more diverse have better bottom lines. And I forget what the exact number was, but I think it was something like 20% more, better financial outcomes for companies that are more diverse than those that are not. So I think it's important that you have conversations and communications about, hey, how can we be better?
I think also supporting those organizations financially, right? So many of us are involved in these nonprofits where we depend on fundraising, and a huge piece of that is networking and people, of course, showing up and supporting the events. But we have to have that fundraising to keep some of our events, whether it's a hybrid event or in-person event, going. So I'd ask that folks just remember that too. When it gets more challenging, that's probably a time when we need folks to lean in even more and be able to support financially, just to keep it going, and just keep that in mind when it gets a little bit more challenging.
100% agree with the financial piece, but I'd say for the people who also don't have finances, if you have time, that's another thing that volunteer organizations can definitely use, is more hands to help get the things done, because that a lot of times will help reduce the financial the need to spend money. I think always number one is finances, financial support, but if not, time is also another way that can be helpful.
Would you agree that getting the word out about these organizations goes hand in hand with that? Because I suspect that a lot of folks in the industry at large may still not be aware of these various organizations like Black Girls Hack or the Diana Initiative. So perhaps being bold about talking about it and mentioning it to anybody and everyone that would be willing to listen. Perhaps, I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I would agree completely. I think that Diana Initiative and Black Girls Hack probably live on the opposite end of the spectrum. You see Diana Initiative, and just by its name, you may not necessarily know what it is that they do, or that they're a women's organization, or what their focus is, and I think that that's probably like cybersecurity realm, right? And then for us, people assume, oh well, Black Girls Hack, they're clearly about hacking and it's for Black girls, right? And I think that, on both ends of that spectrum, if you just look at the things on face value, you'd probably be incorrect, right? Because Black Girls Hack is open to all, and Diana Initiative, focuses on so many different things that you wouldn't necessarily just know just from looking. So, I think that, a lot of times people assume, like that, hey, Black Girls Hack must only be for Black girls, and then when the people, send messages and say, hey, do you support, I am a cis white male, is it okay if I come? And I'm like, yes, please come back. So it's just a matter about, getting the word out, but then also not being afraid to, communicate, ask, and see what's available, and who these organizations serve.
So, Caitlin, Mickey, any other building blocks that you think are necessary or at least beneficial for a successful DEI program that comes to mind?
I will kind of just step in here, and that to kind of just add on. Money is a really big thing, and especially right now for many of these organizations. I'm on the board of was on the board of directors for Portland Women in Tech, and unfortunately, them being a 501c3 and the pushback that's come all across the nation for DEI initiatives has really taken a heavy toll on donations to all of these organizations, and it actually forced Portland Women in Tech to actually close down after years and years and years of providing, support to the community. So, I mean, it's really important that people, continue to back these organizations.
Absolutely. I think that that's absolutely true. Last year thought, hey, this is a really hard year for nonprofits. And, it seemed like it was absolutely horrible. But then this year, it's like, it's really hard for nonprofits, I think even more so than it was last year, just because as a result of some of the downstream impacts of that ruling by the Supreme Court. And, a lot of organizations have eliminated or drastically reduced their DEI programs in terms of their hiring, right? Which makes it a lot harder, specifically in Women's History Month, for some of the underrepresented groups like women to be able to get hired, right? Because there's like, hey, we don't need to have a focus on this. And I think in order for us to be able to operate and do the things that we do, money is the most important thing in order for us to keep operating, because I think that I would hate for, the amazing people that both Diana Initiative and Black Girls Hack support and help to get, certifications and network and to get jobs, for us not to exist, a year down the line because, of the attack on DEI and, I think the notion that it's not important anymore. That it's trying to achieve equity is not important anymore.
Can we ask our attendees, if you're here today, go tell 2, 3, 4, 5 people about Black Girls Hack, Diana Initiative. I'm sure you may know more, but go post it in one of your work channels, put it on your LinkedIn. Like I said, go tell somebody about it, because I think that's a huge piece of it. Like others said, it's that word of mouth and kind of that don't be afraid to talk about it. Just because it's being talked at the Supreme Court level is something that's not needed or not positive. Like, we're still here, we're not going away, we're still pushing for it, and we have to still use our voices to keep it moving and make sure that some of these organizations are still supported.
Yeah, and I think that the underrepresented communities don't, fail to exist because the programs are no longer in existence, right? The impetus for having DEI programs, which was a lack of equity, a lack of, equality, those things still exist. We still need to, try to increase diversity in cybersecurity and technology as a whole. So I think that just on a human level, it's important for people to spread the word, to donate time and or money. And if they don't have the ability to talk to their companies, talk to the people who do have the money and do have the time, and say, hey, these are great organizations. They've been around for a while, and it would suck if they were not, at some point in the future. So let's support them.
I think the two of you have been saying something here, but I want to make it explicit, right? Because it shouldn't be taken for granted. Because the questions about what are the building blocks necessary or beneficial for a successful program. A DEI program is definitely beneficial to a successful program at a company overall, right? So, and I just want to state that explicitly. Other thoughts? Any other building blocks that the three of you?
I will hop on the back of what you just said about the DEI. The ERG programs are needed, and say that not just are they needed, but they also need money, because I've been in companies where there have been ERG groups that are like, hey, you're free to get together and talk about, your problems, but, you don't have an executive sponsor. You don't have, basically money to be able to affect change. You don't have the support of the organization to be able to actually implement that change throughout the organization to actually make a difference. One of the companies I worked for before, their ERG group says, hey, we're not going to be like your token, Black people, or we're not going to be on your campaigns or, whatever until we actually start to see meaningful, change within the company. And I was like, I'm sitting here trying to problem solve and being like, hey, when you go to your website, it looks like super homogenous. Maybe if we put a little color on it, it might. And they're like, no, we're not putting any color till they actually, make a concerted effort to make sure that there's, change within the company. So I think having an executive sponsor and having money to be able to do the things, don't just, talk about it, be about it.
Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned ERGs because I think that is a key aspect of this that ties into some of the organizations that we're representing today. And when I talk about ERGs, I like to say, like, yes, you can spin them up with no budget, but have that budget sheet ready to go. Have your documentation very tight because you should be asking for budget, right? And understand what you're asking for so that when, however you get the money, whether it's, upfront at the beginning of the fiscal year when you're able to ask or there's leftovers, make sure that you can tell whoever's asking, an executive sponsor or your finance person, how you're going to spend that money, what the benefit will be. And a lot of it, from what I've seen, has come back to that documentation. And when you have it tight and it's clean and you can come in and say, this is what we'll use it for, it makes it a lot easier to be able to spend that money. And I also talk with some women that say, I've been told no with with the ERG that I'm working with. I said, that's fine. But you put a reminder on your calendar for once a quarter or once a month, and you send your message, you call your finance person, you call your executive sponsor, and you continue and you don't stop. Even if they tell you no 5 times, you keep asking because you're gonna need that budget, and you should have that budget to be able to spend it within your ERG community.
Mm. And Caitlin, this actually sounds like you're providing a solution for a challenge, which is a great segue to the next segment here. And of course, this is going to come back to you right after I recite the question here. But the question is, of the successful programs you've seen in the past, which hurdles have had to be overcome, and how do they address those challenges? And you've already given us one example of perseverance and documentation to ensure future funding for an ERG. But what are some of the other things that you can think of, or some of the other hurdles that you've seen in the past, and how were they overcome?
Yeah, I'll double down on that documentation piece in terms of um, the how, the why, the what, the when, right? Of understanding how you're going to be standing up, whether it's the internal ERG like we're talking about, or maybe it's a nonprofit organization. Anyone most likely that's going to be getting involved, whether it's a volunteer, someone that's financially supporting, they're going to want to see that you have your ducks in order and that you sort of thought through what these groups are going to go after and stand for. I think Tanisha touched on it earlier. A huge piece of that is volunteers. It's bandwidth, it's time from people. I think probably everybody on the call today is doing this in their own free time because they're passionate about it and they want to keep it going. I've experienced difficulty in getting volunteers at times, but just like I said earlier with budget, you keep asking and you say, hey, do you have 5 minutes? Do you have an hour? It doesn't have to be this big, huge, scary commitment. Take folks up on what they can commit and when they can commit it in terms of time, and ensure that you, as maybe the leader or the person that's directing, are taking care of your bandwidth perspective as well, because you don't want to get burnt out. And if you do, make sure you have a co-founder or another board member that you can say, hey, this is a tough week for me. I'm going to have to step back a little bit, and they'll have your back and say, that's no problem. I can step in and help drive some of these webinars or events that are going on or whatever it may be. But I think a huge part of that, again, is the documentation, the finding your people, whether it's volunteers. And then you all heard me harp on budget earlier, so I won't hit on that again. But I think those are kind of my three main pieces that I like to look for.
Excellent. So, Mickey, Tanisha, do you have 4, 5, and 6 that you can add to the list?
Oh, absolutely. I've got another one that I can add in. One of the things that's really come up really heavy in the last couple of years is, of course, pushback on DEI programs, right? And so being able to answer that pushback. So many times, Gartner had a really good article a couple of years ago about how to identify and deal with DEI pushback. And they basically said, came up with this these three segments called denial, disengagement, and derailment. And those are basically the three types of DEI pushback we see a lot of, which is where you have denial, where people say this isn't a problem, or you have disengagement where they say this is not our problem, or derailment where they say, what about all of these other problems that we have, right? And so trying to deal with that and learning how to deal with DEI pushback is paramount to having a successful DEI program.
I'm glad you said that, Mickey, because that's what I had to learn. And that's why I speak on the documentation piece of speaking with someone and they said that to me, right? If this isn't a problem, or why do you need this? And I was actually taken aback that I couldn't articulate it well because I was sort of in shock. And so that was a big learning for me of being able to clearly articulate it in writing, and I should say in person too when you're speaking with someone, because you're absolutely right of being sort of pushed through. I think you said sort of 3 key areas that you have to work through, and it's uncomfortable, but I think if we know that it exists, then when we come into those conversations, we'll be like, oh, okay, piece of cake. I know how to handle this, even though it can be definitely challenging.
I would say that the successful programs that I've seen that have done well have done things like as simple as, like if you have a formal mentoring program in place within your organization, right, to help like some of the underrepresented folks or the people who are trying to, upskill in their career, actually providing time for that mentoring. And not expecting people to do their 8 hours of work and then, spend an hour or two, a week or a month or whatever mentoring, but include that as part of the time that's your 40 or 60, whatever your billable hours per week, right? To actually provide time to help people to feel comfortable and to grow, right? Because when we're looking at, the purpose of these programs, it's to, one, make sure that we have diversity in these spaces, but then two, also to make sure that people who are in these spaces that are there to help them to feel acclimated and to feel comfortable being there. And I think that mentoring is a big part of that. And companies that I've seen that have said, hey, you get so many hours per month for giving back or for mentoring or for something like that, that's part of the putting your money where your mouth is and not just talking about, trying to affect change.
So on the mentoring bit, I've done mentoring in the past for ERGs that I've been involved with, and it's not a huge lift to be a mentor. It really isn't. I mean, you're not taking out a whole lot of your time to talk to somebody that's more early in career. So it's an easy thing to do, in my opinion.
It is, but I think there's a difference between good mentors and bad mentors. And I think that, trying to define it the same way that we address like security policies and ethics within corporations, right? We have to establish, hey, what are our boundaries? Like, what do we define as ethical? How do we establish those? I think that with mentoring, we need to do the same thing because we want to make sure that we are actually helping people in their careers and not, for example, making them feel alienated, right? Because I've had mentors who've been absolutely amazing that have helped to uplift me and, help encourage me. But then I've also had ones that have said, hey, you're imagining these things, like when you speak up and, you say something and then a man speaks up and says the same thing, but then they get credit for the idea. Maybe you're not looking at that situation correctly, or maybe you weren't articulating yourself well, or, I'm saying they'll say things that are like, hey, your reality is not actually your reality, right? So I think that how do you be a good mentor? How do you be a good ally? How do you be, a good support system for someone is important, right? Because, good intentions are great, but, there are some times people's own biases tend to get in the way of them being effective in those things.
I agree with you 100%, Tanisha. I mean, I have been in this industry for a number of years, and I've had great mentors. I've had mediocre mentors, and I've had really bad mentors. One of the things that I really suggest people do is they go out to the different organizations for some of these intersectional marginalized communities. So like I mentor with Out in Tech, I mentor with Anita B organization. And so I pick a bunch of different organizations to go do my mentoring with, to try to hit a very broad, swath of the public, so that way I'm not stuck in one specific area and not stuck with just mentoring the same group of people all of the time.
I was about to say I do the same thing. I've mentored with Blacks in Technology and WESIS, and of course with Black Girls Hack, and I do that not because hey, I've got more hours in the day than everybody else, but because I think it's important that for people who are looking for a mentor, for them to have people who look different, what I'm saying, or like them, and there may not be as many people in other organizations that look like me as there are, an organization called Black Girls Hack. There's probably a lot of Black girls in that organization that you could find somebody that looks like you, right? But within other organizations as well, just to let people know, like, hey, I've got all of this experience, like, learn from me. That's why I started doing this work. It's because I think it's important that, we kind of share our collective experience and some of the, road bumps that we've hit along the way and how they can kind of avoid some of those and maybe make their path a little bit easier.
Right. So aside from mentorship, which is very important, but aside from mentorship, what else have you all seen in terms of hurdles for successful programs, and how are they addressed?
One thing I think you see a lot of in a lot of big corporations is a lack of empathy from the people dealing with these marginalized groups. They have absolutely no understanding of what these marginalized groups go through. And so, creating like Tanisha said earlier, a safe space where you can actually go in and train and explain to people how this works, and basically foster empathy throughout the organization. To me, that's super important.
I think maybe this goes back to the previous question too about building blocks. Would you agree that support from the top is highly crucial?
Well, everybody says that, and it's one of those things where a lot of times you see companies support it from the top. Most employees want this, but it tends to be the middle management that shrugs it off, and because they're under certain time guidelines, or they're under production quotas or things like that, and they don't see the value of actually doing this, and so you have more pushback from the middle than you should, and so therein lies one of the biggest problems.
I agree with you completely, but I think that we within cybersecurity face the same type of problem, right? Because if we don't have like our guidelines, our standards, our policies and procedures adopted and then pushed out, and the importance of them, having an important information security, guidelines and policies, if that's not pushed down and adopted throughout the organization, then it's not going to be implemented effectively. I think that we just need to do the same thing that we do, the same fight that we have within cybersecurity, which is like, hey, if we're going to make our organizations more secure, then this needs to be a top-down effort that is adopted widespread. We need the same type of leadership, when it comes to DEI. And I'm going to go ahead and say, like, regardless of whether or not, the Supreme Court, what the Supreme Court is actually saying, I think from a human moral compass perspective, I think that you can kind of tell like how you feel about it. And if you feel like it is wrong for people not to be treated equally, then what are you doing about it? How are you helping? Are you interviewing people who don't look like you? Are you mentoring people who don't look like you? Are you sponsoring people who don't look like you? Are you donating to organizations that, address people who don't look like you? What are you doing? Because there's a difference between just, sitting in your nice, cushy lives and doing nothing and saying like, hey, it's wrong, and actually doing something about it. And I'm not saying like, hey, start like a whole nonprofit, because I can tell you that's a lot. But I'd say that there's other ways that you can get in that are less time and life consuming.
And I did want to clarify, I didn't mean that it shouldn't be pushed down from the top. It absolutely has to be, right? So, I mean, there is no doubt about that. It cannot be a bottom-up situation. It has to be pushed down from the top.
Tanisha, I love how you analogize the challenge of security with the challenge of DEI, right? Because in security, as you said, like we influence, right? Security tends to own nothing, but is responsible for protecting the organization. So everything we do is influence to the best that we can, and trying to push for DEI is essentially an influencing effort as well. So I love how you analogize between the two. I think some great parallels to learn from. All right, so let's move on to our third segment here, and this is for the folks who are early in career. And Mickey, you're going to lead off this segment over here. And the question is, suppose I'm early in career. What should I look for if I want to join an inclusive environment? So if I'm looking for a job, what are some of the signs that I should be looking for to know ahead of time before I sign the offer that, hey, I'm going to be accepted here. I'm going to do well here. I'm going to be able to be my best self.
There's so many things to look for, but I mean, some of the simplest things are, number one, read the job posting. Do they use inclusive language? Do they use non-gendered language? Do they use, are they trying to attract different groups of people, or are they targeting one specific, segment? I always say, go look at the company's website and look at any of their social media. I mean, that right there will give you a big clue as to what the company's culture is like. Reach out if you can to current or former employees, right? If you know anybody that works there, ask them, what it's like. Ask lots of questions at the interview. And ask things like, do they have an employee resource group? Do they, are they an inclusive environment in that they have training and, other things like that? And, what resources or benefits do they offer for their marginalized groups? And then also, how do they promote diversity and inclusion inside the company? What is the company culture actually like? But, also, if you're there for an interview, is to pay attention at the interview as to what's going on around you. I can't tell you how many times I've gone in for an interview, and it's a panel interview, and I walk in and I have 5 cis white males sitting there in front of me to do my interview. Absolutely zero diversity. There's nobody there that looks like me. There's no women, anything. And I mean, that's a big red flag right there as to, what's going on here. Check to see if they've asked you any inappropriate questions, such as your age or your marital status or anything like that, right? Because those things, aren't necessary for that job, right? So, I just say, do really good investigative work on your own for the company that you want to go to work for.
So OSINT for DEI?
I was going to say the exact same thing. Some slight OSINT. Like whenever I am applying for a job, I will always do some slight stalking, aka OSINTing, of whoever it is that I'm interviewing with, the people who are actually working in that department, and I will have conversations. And I think this too often people assume like they want the jobs to like pick me, right? But I'd say that it's more like a dating situation where it's not just like I want you to choose me, but I want to make sure that you're a good fit for me as well, right? Because I don't want to step to a place where I'm going to be uncomfortable. I don't want to step into a place where I'm not going to be supportive, where there's nobody that looks like me. Like I don't want to train you on, how to have a woman on your technical team or how to have a woman on your penetration testing team. I don't want to be like necessarily the use case, right? Where you're like, hey, everybody else has always looked exactly the same. And then like, oh, well, we need to hire a Black person now at this point, right? So it's like, making sure that, they're a good fit for you as much as you're a good fit for them, right? They wouldn't be talking to you unless they, they thought that you could be a good fit, but you also have the ability to be like, hey, I don't think this is going to be a good fit for who I am. Because like for me, like I'll tell people like, hey, I run a nonprofit. I tend to, run my mouth a lot, like on podcasts or TV or whatever. So if you have a problem with, very strong, opinionated Black women, this might not be a good fit. And I had conversations like that with my manager when I started because I was like, if I'm going to be spending the next year or two of my life with you, I don't want to, you just to be happy. I want to make sure I'm happy too.
Mm, mm. Let me jump in here for a minute. So just a reminder, everybody, if you have a question for the panelists, please put it in the chat mechanism for whichever platform you're on. And after this segment, we'll go through and answer a few of them. But in the meantime, Caitlin, any thoughts on this for those who are early in career?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mickey outlined it really great when she initially answered. I think the one thing I would add would be don't be afraid to use your network. Like even if it's a connection 3 people removed, ask if this person can connect you with that person if it's somebody inside the company that you're looking for. I had that exact experience last week of someone connecting me with their mentee for a role. And I said, I'm more than happy to share my perspective. Just keep in mind, right? This is my perspective that I've experienced, but still remind them, just like Mickey said, to go through, do your own digging. And I am a huge LinkedIn user. And so I go all through people's posts, whether they say, oh, this isn't the company opinion, this is my own, because I think that, that speaks volumes. I also like to take a look at, is the company posting things when it's not Women's History Month, when it's not another marginalized groups month? Because of course we see everyone change their logo or put out their posts, but that's great to see that to a certain extent, but what's happening the rest of the year and who's speaking on these things the rest of the year? So I like to keep that in mind as well. And again, I'll just double down on that networking piece. Don't be afraid to reach out to people to help you understand more than just what you can see, on your own research if you need that inside perspective of the company or of a role.
And I would say that for the people who are mentors or sponsors or are helping like the younger generation, one of the things I did was open up so that people can see who the people that I'm connected with. I think there's a privacy setting within LinkedIn where you can hide that. But I actually open it up because like I'll tell, my mentees that there's somebody that I'm connected to at a company or in a space that you're trying to get into, like, and I can facilitate a conversation. Let me know, stalk the people that are connected to me, see if there's anybody that could be useful to you and what you're trying to do. And then, like Caitlin said, you let your network, to make those connections, because I think that most of the time jobs are obtained through side doors and back doors and not through the front door. So it's more about your network and who you know than it is about did you make it through the front door ATS system and meet all of their check boxes and all of the things. So hone up on your OSINT skills if you have not your site stalking skills.
So what would you recommend if somebody who's early in career is applying to, it's a question for all of you, applying to a smaller company, maybe a startup where there isn't as much of a social media footprint, digital footprint out there? Like, what are still some of the things that you can do in that case?
Ask about the teams that are made up. I mean, if you're coming in, as long as you're not employee 1 or 2, I'm assuming that, this is a small startup and there's already teams there. Ask about the teams, ask about their team makeup, ask about, what their plans are going forward for teams. How are they approaching diversity? Are they hiring from one college? Are they hiring from one state? Are they hiring from, are they looking broadly for employees, or are they, narrowly focused?
Yeah, the last 10 minutes of most interviews I've ever done have been like, hey, do you have any questions for me? Take advantage of that. Like Mickey said, ask, what is the makeup of the team that I'm going to be on? What is the percentage of women that are on that team? Do you have minority folks that are on the team? Ask those questions. And I think that if the people that you're applying for are offended or, don't like those questions or don't have that number, then that could be like a red flag that says that, hey, this might not be the best place for me. But use that time to, be like, hey, let me find out about you too.
I'd say too, for early in career, sort of stepping into that networking piece can be sort of scary at times. Like you feel like you don't know anybody, or maybe you don't know your stuff. Most of us have gone through that before, but team up with one of the organizations that you see today, or WESIS or WISP, and there will be people that have gone through the same feelings that you're going through right now of maybe feeling like you don't have a network yet. That's fine. Reach out to me, reach out to one of us on LinkedIn. You now have our network, right? And it just keeps going and going. But sometimes that's the hardest part, is just stepping into it, whether you have to hit send on a message or, attend something like today, and you see someone's name here and you say, hey, Nicole, I saw you in the chat. I was in the webinar as well. Like, you want to grab, a virtual coffee, or just, kind of share our experiences. Like, that's how those things happen. It took me a while to learn that sort of from a networking perspective, because when you do come into some of these organizations, it appears that everyone knows each other. They've known each other forever, but all you have to do is do that one reach out, and then you're part of that, internal network of folks. And it can be very powerful when it comes to stepping into a new role or a new company, to have that expanded network of people that you can rely on.
And to sort of fill that out, for those in the audience who are not familiar, I'm just going to enumerate a bunch of DI focused organizations that I know of, and the three of you, please jump in if I miss anything. But there's Blacks in Cyber, BIC. There's Black Cybersecurity Association, BCA. There's WESIS that we mentioned. There's also WISP, I believe. There's also Lake, I think it's pronounced Lake, Latinas in Cyber is another one. And then another organization I'm familiar with is Cyversity. So those are and of course the Diane Initiative and Black Girls Hack.
Yeah, I would add Raices, and they're Latin and cyber focused cybersecurity organization as well. BBWIC, which is Breaking Borders Women in Cybersecurity, I think. I want to say they're based out of the UK, but they are also like a DEI focused organizations. Women Cyber Jitsu, Empower Her, Cybersecurity, Black Girls in Cyber. Are some of the ones that come off of the top of my head. But all of these organizations, at least the ones that I mentioned, I know their founders, I know the people who are in the organizations. I'm probably part of the organizations myself, and I wouldn't tell you about them unless I felt like they were worth your time. And I tell people all the time, these organizations are not like street gangs, right? You don't have to, pick one and then rep those colors forever type of vibe, right? I recommend to people to, join a lot of different organizations to try to see, where your tribe is, see where you feel comfortable, and be a part of multiple organizations, because different organizations offer different things in terms of their services, mentoring, in terms of all of the things. So, it's not like you have to just pick one. I'm a part of Cyber Jitsu. I'm a part of, Black Girls in Cyber and Blacks in Technology. And, like I said, I've been part of Cyversity and WESIS. So, I think that's important for you to take advantage of the different services that the different organizations do. But I would just stress, and this is just my personal opinion as Tanisha the Human, that, you not just be a leech, right? Don't just go and take, right? Let it be like a two-way thing where it's give back to the organizations that are helping you within your career. whether that be like mentoring or helping with an event or volunteering for a conference or, whatever the case may be, helping to review resumes or, whatever your particular set of skills are, is to, and if you can't, give back in terms of time, of course, give back in terms of money. If they help you to get a job, maybe when you get your first paycheck, donate something to that organization so they can continue to help other people to get their jobs, right? So, let it be a two-way street and not just, I'm just taking all of the things that are being given to me.
I'll add in one more, girl security from a more of a national security perspective. And then for some of the larger organizations that maybe do require, a yearly subscription or member fee, a lot of the times the company that you're working for will reimburse you for those memberships. Like I think some of them are like $100 a year. Again, with budget, don't stop asking about that. If you do get a, hey, what kind of training do you want to do this year, or do you have any fees that need to be taken care of? Make sure that you are putting those forth. And again, don't stop asking. I know Hacker and Heels, I'm not involved in that organization, but I do see some overlap with every Friday morning, there's the Cyber Queens podcast with Meryl and Stacy from Hacker and Heels came over recently. So there's tons of podcasts. We could probably spend another hour talking about podcasts or books as well, but I'll mention those ones briefly.
And I take and add in my few. You've also got big corporate or big nonprofits like Anita B, which is a great one to be involved with. Out in tech, Lesbians Who Tech, Trans Tech Social. All of those are all dealing with various intersectional groups of marginalized representation. And so they're really great to be involved with, and I've been involved with some of them since the very beginning, like Trans Tech Social. You can't go wrong. There's, once again, having a diverse group of organizations that you belong to will do nothing but help you.
Yeah, and I think most people define themselves in a lot of different ways, right? So, I'm a woman, so I'm a part of women's groups, and I'm an African American, so I'm a part of African American groups. And, however it is that you define yourself, I'm an engineer, so I might be a part of engineering groups or in hackers groups. And, however you define yourself, there are organizations that are out here that, can help you to do things that are in that space and help you define your community. And I would also say that, as you're considering your donations, your giving for the year, that you look past the big glaring big organizations and then also look at some of the smaller organizations that have been around for a while as well. Because I know a lot of times as a small organization, we've been around for, I think, 4 years at this point, a little over 4 years. But a lot of the giving goes to a lot of the much larger organizations. But there are other organizations that are smaller that need help as well. So, as you're considering your giving, just consider groups of different sizes, not necessarily less trust, but just, not as big of a profile.
So for those of you in the audience, I'm going to take an action item to actually write down the list of organizations that we mentioned in the last 3 minutes. So you don't have to memorize and you don't have to jot it down in your notes. I'll jot it down for you and I'll post it somewhere. All right. Let's go on to the next segment, which is Q&A. Nicole, I think we have time for one question probably for the panelists. Is there a question that you think is would be the best one for everybody to answer? Nicole. Okay. All right. She just sent it in chat here. So it's for the panelists. The question is, how can I do diversity, equity, inclusion, employee resource groups better? So this is going to be lightning round here. Each one of you has basically a minute or so on your thoughts on how can I do DEI ERGs better?
I can go first. I will say we mentioned this earlier, but practice that active listening. whether you are leading a DE&I group or you're a participant in Ally, it goes for everyone. And then I'll triple down on my don't stop asking, whether it's for resourcing or volunteers, right? You stay persistent, and you, even if someone tells you no, go away, stop asking, I don't want to, give money or volunteer, continue to be persistent, because you are going to have setbacks, but you need to be able to continue to move forward. Find your buddy if you need somebody to kind of tag team that, but you don't stop asking. So you need to listen, but also you need to continue to be asking at the same time.
I would say give the groups time to be able to do the things, give them money to be able to accomplish the things, and executive sponsorship, leadership to be able to actually make an impact within the company.
Mm-hmm.
And mine would be, invite your employees to engage in DEI efforts. It has to be something, you've got to be able to encourage them to come in and leverage their skills and their networks and interests to help, contribute to and sponsor programs. Without their help, you're not going to get anywhere.
Thank you. And that rounds out our webcast for the day. A few call to actions here. But, Nicole, can you drop in the links for the donations one last time into the chat here? So first call to action is, as we've been talking about here, if you want to volunteer, great. If you want to donate, support financially, great too. The links for financial support are posted right here at the bottom of the webcast. But, as the panelists have been talking about, volunteering is a great way to network and to find your tribe, and who knows, may lead to a job in the future. So look for those organizations where you feel like you belong and contribute time and effort if you can. And last but not least, I just want to thank all the panelists for sharing with us their insights on what makes a successful DEI program and what early and career folks can do to find the place where they belong. I certainly learned a lot from this conversation, so thank you all very much. And finally, last call to action is, go ahead and reach out to us on LinkedIn. Connect with us. I mean, I'm volunteering the three of you, of course, but I imagine you all agree. Yeah, everybody in the audience, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or Mastodon or whichever social media platform you use. We all are in this for the love of it. So, love to hear from you all.
I also want to give a shout out to Huxley, our wonderful moderator.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you on the next webcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.